There comes a moment in every long winter when the silence begins to break, not all at once, mind you, but quietly, almost imperceptibly. The frost loosens its grip, and the deep hush of frozen fear starts to lift. It is in such moments that the brave take notice, and the wicked begin to tremble, though they do not yet know why. Let us speak of signs. Not grand proclamations or booming voices from the sky, but subtle shifts, a bird's song, a trickle of thawing water, the scent of something living in a land long held in cold death. These are the heralds of a deeper magic, older than any evil can remember and far beyond its reach. There is a law that was written before stone, a music that was sung before the stars, and it cannot be undone. In a realm where cruelty reigns with icy fingers and where joy has been exiled, even a single robin can become a prophet. So often we look for our salvation in might and spectacle, in roaring fires and thunderous armies, but it comes instead like warmth seeping through snow, quietly, steadily, without fanfare. There is power in gentleness. There is defiance in a smile given in the cold. And so we find ourselves in the most curious company, children caught up in a story they did not write, and yet were always meant to join. They do not yet understand the roles they play. Their courage is untested, their loyalty uncertain, but still they walk forward, and that, perhaps, is the first sign that winter is failing, when ordinary hearts begin to move in extraordinary directions. Evil does not fall all at once. It resists, it deceives, it lashes out as it dies. Even as the ice melts, the enemy rages. That which clings to control and domination cannot abide the freedom of spring. When the coldest throne begins to crack, its occupant grows desperate, but the change has already begun. The deep earth remembers, the trees know, the wind carries whispers, and into this breaking world there comes a presence. Not loud, not boastful, but terrible in its beauty and ancient strength. You do not see it at first, you feel it, like a rising hope you didn't know you'd lost, like a name half remembered in a dream. Like justice returning to a land that had forgotten what justice meant. The snow starts to drip, the forest stirs, and a sleigh once gliding in triumph finds its wheels sinking into mud. And with that presence, gifts are given. Not gold or silver, but things far rarer. Courage for the fearful, weapons for the willing, healing for the wounded. The time of hiding is ending. The silence is over. What was frozen is breaking. What was captive is awakening. And the one who has always been king is near. The journey is not finished. The darkest hour is still to come, but everything has changed. The air itself declares it. The thaw is the beginning of the end, for not even the longest winter can withstand the coming of the sun. The breaking of winter symbolizes the return of hope and ancient truth. In the heart of a land locked in endless winter, there is a profound symbolism that stretches far beyond the snow and ice. The unchanging cold represents more than a season. It represents despair, stagnation, and a world frozen in fear. When winter never ends, it does something to the soul. It convinces hearts that warmth is a myth, that joy has long departed, and that time itself is stuck. It is not just the land that is frozen. It is the spirit of the people, the animals, and the trees. Everything that should grow, sing, move, or rejoice is held under an oppressive silence. Yet within that silence, there remains a deeper truth that even the cold cannot kill. There is something older than fear, something stronger than ice. It is not loud, and it does not announce itself with force, but it is present, it waits, and when it begins to stir, the entire world starts to shift with it. This return of hope does not come as a shout or a storm. It begins with the smallest signs, almost laughably gentle, a few drips of water, a patch of softened snow, a distant sound of birdsong where none has been heard for years. These are not accidents, they are proclamations, for in a world where evil has reigned so long, any break in its power is not a coincidence, it is a signal. Something greater is returning, and with it, the promises that once seemed lost. The deep magic, the law beneath the world, has not been undone by the darkness. It only waits for its time to reawaken, and when it does, it comes not as a battle cry, but as a renewal of what once was and what always should have been. In such a world, the thawing of winter is not simply about the weather. It is a restoration of justice, the healing of a land that has been wounded. The snow beginning to melt is a sign that truth is advancing, quietly and steadily. The ice does not fall all at once. It cracks, it loosens, it seeps away, but each moment of thaw is a declaration that the cold is losing its grip. The earth begins to remember the warmth. The trees start to believe again in the sun. The wind changes direction, and the very air begins to feel different. Those who have been under the rule of the winter sense it before they see it. And though they might not understand it fully, they know that something good is coming. Even more powerful is the knowledge that this change was always written. Evil, no matter how fierce or deeply rooted, does not write the final story. The witch may freeze the land, may terrorize its people, may turn hearts to stone, but she cannot rewrite the oldest truths. There is a king returning, one whose power is not rooted in fear or force, but in love and sacrifice. His coming is the reason the snow begins to melt. His presence, even before he appears, changes the story. The cold cannot stand before him. The old lies begin to unravel, and those once caught in darkness begin to stir. The deep magic that was laid before the dawn of time still holds. It has not been undone. It cannot be overthrown. It waits, it watches, and then, at the right moment, it moves. When it moves, the impossible happens. The winter begins to break, and in that breaking, hope is no longer just a memory or a wish. It is real, breathing awakening. It comes not because people have earned it, but because it was promised, because it is true, and because even the longest winter must eventually end when the true king draws near. Small signs and ordinary acts reveal the presence of a greater power at work. When the world seems locked in silence and shadow, it is not always the clash of armies or the shout of heroes that signals a change. Often, the shift begins with something so small that it can easily be overlooked. A robin fluttering across a branch, a trickle of water running through the snow, or the sudden stillness of the wind before it changes direction. These are not mere details. They are messages. In a place where darkness has reigned through fear and silence, even the faintest sound can become a prophecy. The gentle arrival of these signs speaks not only of nature's change, but of a deeper, older truth stirring beneath the surface. It is not the power of noise that defeats evil, but the strength of meaning found in seemingly insignificant things. This is the wisdom often missed in a world that waits only for loudness to confirm what is real in such a moment. The smallest act of courage becomes more than a choice. It becomes an echo of the greater story being written. When one chooses to trust a bird, follow a trail, or speak kindness in the face of fear, that person aligns themselves with something ancient and strong. These are not just gestures, they are alignments with the very heart of truth. Evil thrives when all is still and unquestioned, but it is weakened the moment a soul dares to move differently. A whispered hope, a step taken without full understanding, becomes a declaration against despair. It says, without words, that the cold is not the final word. It says that another voice is coming, one that knows how to bring warmth even into the deepest frost. The arrival of such signs also speaks of a presence at work, one that does not demand attention, but changes everything simply by being near. The witch does not yet see the full danger, but she feels it. Her sleigh slows, her whip strikes more often. She senses, though she cannot name it, that something is slipping out of her control. The land that once obeyed her is no longer silent. It begins to sing again, not in words, but in melting snow and rustling branches, and even those who once feared her power begin to look up and question. They start to wonder what lies beyond her rule. That is the power of small signs. They awaken the imagination, they stir the soul, they challenge the lie that nothing will ever change. The presence that brings these signs does not act with haste. It is patient, measured, and sure. It does not race to confront evil with a sword. It surrounds it with life. Where death once stood proud, green shoots begin to rise. Where silence ruled, laughter dares to return. It is not merely about defeating the witch. It is about restoring the whole world. And that restoration begins not with shouts or triumphs, but with whispers and nudges, with gifts given in secret, with promises kept quietly, with warmth returning to fingertips and songbirds daring to sing. Each small moment contains within it the heartbeat of something far greater, something more enduring than any curse or crown. The children, too, are caught in this quiet unfolding. They are not warriors. They are uncertain, afraid, and learning, yet they are present, they are willing, and their willingness is enough for now. They begin to see the signs and respond, not with mastery, but with movement. They walk, they wonder, they follow. In doing so, they participate in the breaking of winter. They are not spectators to a great story. They are true. Transformation begins quietly, but signals the fall of evil's reign. True transformation rarely begins with spectacle. It starts in places almost too quiet to notice, growing slowly in shadows and soft spaces where the world does not yet look. In the breaking of winter's grip, what unfolds is not just the changing of seasons, but the undoing of a deep and ancient wound. The land itself, once locked in stillness and fear, begins to awaken with a kind of memory. Not a memory of pain, but a memory of what it was created to be. Trees that once stood cold and bare begin to remember how to stretch toward light. Streams that were frozen in silence begin to remember how to laugh and flow. Every part of the world seems to recognize something returning, something it once knew but had forgotten in the long night. And in this remembering, the first steps of transformation take place. It is not a force imposed from above, but a presence that draws things into their true form. What was twisted begins to straighten, what was muted begins to sing, what was lifeless begins to stir. This is not merely repair, it is recreation. The deep magic written into the foundations of the world reasserts itself, not by breaking through with violence, but by reclaiming what was always its own. The thawing snow is not just melting ice, it is the beginning of justice. It is the healing of identity. It is the announcement that the world is not abandoned, that its story is not over, and that its truest chapters are yet to be written. Evil resists such transformation because it cannot understand it. It believes in control, in force, in keeping things still so that nothing changes. But transformation is not a force it can stop. It happens even when no one is watching. It begins in hearts before it shows itself in actions. A frightened boy chooses to believe he is more than his failure. A young girl trusts the guidance of a creature she barely knows. A family decides to take one more step forward through snow they do not yet understand. These are the beginnings of transformation, not because they are strong, but because they respond. They say yes to something greater than themselves, even when they cannot name it. They lean into the mystery. They risk movement in a world that has punished movement, and in doing so, they begin to change. This change does not remove danger. The witch still exists, still schemes, still lashes out with all her fury, but her power is no longer expanding, it is contracting, it is no longer inevitable. Each moment of thaw, each flicker of light, makes her smaller. She may strike harder, but she no longer strikes from certainty. She begins to fear, That fear is the sign that transformation is taking root. Evil has always feared what it cannot control. It has always hated what moves freely. And in the warmth now spreading through the land, there is a freedom it cannot understand. Even the creatures who once hid now emerge. They stretch their limbs, shake off the cold, and look around with wide eyes. They recognize the turning of the tide. They remember the stories whispered in ancient times, the stories of a true king, of a world made right, of a joy deeper than fear. And now, they do not just remember, they believe. That belief is not theoretical, it becomes visible. It shapes their faces, their steps, their songs. They become part of the transformation, not just recipients of it. They join the work of restoration, each in their own small way. A gift given here, a word spoken there, a fire lit in the corner of a dark forest. These are not random acts. They are responses to a call that the world itself is hearing again. A call to become whole, to become true, to become free. The transformation begun in silence becomes a chorus of awakening, not led by heroes or kings alone, but by the humble, the ordinary, the willing. This is the real miracle unfolding.